A dying race sent a last call Deathworlders. Answered in force part. 5. A new dawn. 3 months had passed since the death of Velith Prime. The Velith refugee fleet now orbited a small moon in Terran-protected space, a world the humans had named New Velith. It was not the same as their home. The light was different. The gravity was slightly wrong. But it was safe, and it was theirs. Elder Torvex stood on the surface and watched the construction teams work. Human engineers moved alongside Velithri builders, raising crystal towers that would house the survivors. The designs were new, adapted for this world's different conditions, but they carried echoes of the old architecture. Memory preserved in stone and light. The final count had been devastating. 683 million Velithri had been saved. 117 million had been lost. Nearly a sixth of their entire species, gone in fire and radiation, and 847 humans had died to save the rest. "Elder," said a voice behind him. Torvex turned to find Yuna approaching, her translator device hanging around her neck. She had been assigned as the permanent human liaison to the Velithri, and in 3 months, she had become something like a friend. "The memorial is complete," she said. "Would you like to see it?" Torvex nodded and followed her through the growing city. The streets were busy with activity, Velithri learning new skills, children playing in strange gravity, families beginning to rebuild their lives. It was not perfect. Grief hung in the air like a shadow. But there was also hope. The memorial stood at the center of the city, in a plaza that had been left open to the sky. It was a forest of crystal spires, each one carved with precise care, each one catching the light of new Velith sun and scattering it in patterns of mourning and remembrance. Every spire bore a name. Velithri names for the 117 million who had been lost. Human names for the 847 who had died in the rescue. Captain Moran's spire stood at the center, taller than the rest. Her name was carved in both human letters and Velithri crystal script. Jinho was there, standing before the memorial with his arm in a sling. His injuries from the evacuation had been severe, but he had refused to leave until the last survivor was settled. Now he stared at the names of his fallen comrades, his face unreadable. "We remember them," Torvex said, coming to stand beside him. "For as long as our species exists, we will remember what they did." Jinho nodded slowly. "She had a daughter," he said. "Captain Moran, a 7-year-old girl named Hyunji. I promised I would check on her when I got back to Earth. Will you keep that promise?" "Always." They stood together in silence, human and Velithri, united by grief and gratitude. In a conference room aboard the Galactic Council station, Admiral Taiwan faced a tribunal of alien representatives. The chamber was vast, filled with beings from a dozen species, all of them watching him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to contempt. "Admiral Taiwan," said the Morvathi representative, "you are charged with reckless endangerment of human lives. You ordered your fleet into a radiation zone that exceeded all safety parameters. You pushed your ships beyond their operational limits. You caused the deaths of 847 of your own people." Taiwan stood straight, his uniform pressed, his face calm. "I did," he said. "Do you deny these charges?" "No. I ordered every action described. I take full responsibility." Whispers rippled through the chamber. The Morvathi leaned forward. "Then you admit your actions were irrational? That you risked lives unnecessarily?" "I admit nothing of the sort." Taiwan's voice was steady. "We received a distress call from a dying species. We responded. Every person who flew in that fleet volunteered. Every person who died did so saving innocent lives. There was nothing irrational about it. There was nothing unnecessary about it. It was the right thing to do." "The right thing?" The Morvathi seemed genuinely confused. You sacrificed your own people for strangers. Strangers who could offer you nothing in return. Yes, why? Taiwan was silent for a moment. Then he looked up at the assembled representatives, beings who had refused to help. Beings who had calculated the costs and decided that 800 million lives were not worth the risk. Because that's what humanity does, he said. When someone asks for help, we help. When someone is in danger, we protect them. When someone is dying, we save them. Not because it's profitable. Not because it's safe. Because it's right. He paused, letting his words sink in. You asked why we came when no one else would. I'll tell you why. Because we remember what it's like to be alone. We remember what it's like to be afraid. We remember what it's like to send a call into the darkness and wonder if anyone will answer. His voice hardened. The Velethri sent a call. We answered. And we would do it again. Every single time. That's who we are. The chamber was silent. Then, from the back of the room, Ambassador Colex rose to his feet. I have studied humans for 30 years, he said. I have watched them fight. I have watched them build. I have watched them destroy. But until now, I never understood them. He walked forward until he stood beside Taiwan. The humans are not mad, Colex said. They are not irrational. They are something far more dangerous to our comfortable assumptions. They are a species that refuses to let hope die. They are a species that will sacrifice everything for strangers. They are a species that answers when no one else will. He turned to face the council. Perhaps we should ask ourselves not why they came, but why we did not. On New Veleth, Elder Toravex stood before a communications array and prepared to broadcast a message. Behind him, the sun was setting on a new world, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. This message is for all species of the galaxy, he began. I am Elder Toravex of the Velethri. 3 months ago, our world died. Our sun exploded, and everything we had built over 10,000 generations was destroyed. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Before the end, we sent a call for help to every known civilization. 47 species received our message. 47 species refused to help. They said the risk was too great. They said we had nothing to offer. They said it was not their problem. His voice grew stronger. But one species answered. The humans. The Deathworlders. The creatures that the galaxy warned us about. They came with 340 ships. They came with 50,000 volunteers. They came knowing the danger, knowing the cost, knowing they might die. He looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once seemed so cold and distant. 847 humans gave their lives to save us. They died for strangers. They died for people they had never met, people who could offer them nothing in return. They died because they believed it was right. Tears formed in his crystalline eyes. The galaxy calls them Deathworlders. Monsters, dangerous creatures to be avoided. I call them heroes. I call them friends. I call them the best of what any species can be. He took a breath. Let the stars remember. Let every civilization hear this message and understand. When we were dying, the Deathworlders answered. Not for profit. Not for power. Because it was right. And for as long as our species exists, we will remember who came when we called. Years later, in a distant corner of the galaxy, another species faced extinction. Their world was dying, their people desperate, their calls for help going unanswered. Then, one day, ships appeared on their horizon. Crystal ships, gleaming in the light of their failing sun. Velethri ships and beside them, flying in perfect formation, were human vessels. The message came through, translated into their language, carrying words that would be remembered for generations. Hold on. We're coming. The Deathworlders and their allies had arrived, and they would not leave until everyone was safe, because that was who they were. That was who they would always be, a species that answered when no one else would. The signal came at 3:47 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. Lieutenant Kim. Yuna sat alone in the monitoring station on Luna Base 7. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The night shift was always quiet. Most signals that reached this far were just echoes of old transmissions bouncing off dead satellites. Nothing important ever happened at this hour. Then her screen lit up with something she had never seen before. The signal was weak. It flickered in and out like a dying heartbeat. Yuna leaned forward in her chair and began working through the noise. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could prepare anyone for what the message contained. It took her 2 hours to decode the transmission. When she finally understood the words, her hands began to shake. The message was a plea for help. It came from a species called the Veleth. They were a peaceful people, insect-like in appearance, with 6 limbs and large eyes that could see in total darkness. Their homeworld had been destroyed 3 years ago by a hostile empire known as the Thoran Dominion. Now, the last survivors of their civilization drifted through the outer rim of the galaxy in a fleet of damaged ships. 200,000 Veleth had escaped the destruction. Now, only 80,000 remained. Their engines had failed. Their life support systems were dying. And the Thorn hunting fleet was coming to finish what they had started. The message repeated the same words over and over. Please, anyone, help us. We are dying. Yuna immediately forwarded the signal to the Galactic Council. This was the proper procedure. The Council existed to handle situations exactly like this one. They had ships, resources, and the authority to intervene. She waited for a response. The first reply came from the Corthan Assembly. They expressed sympathy, but explained that the outer rim was too far from their borders. They could not justify the cost of sending a fleet. The second reply came from the Nexari Federation. They noted that the Veleth had no trade agreements with their people. Without economic interest, intervention was not possible. The third reply came from the Galactic Council itself. The message was short and formal. It stated that the Veleth situation was unfortunate but did not meet the criteria for emergency action. The Council wished them well. Yuna read each response with growing disbelief. She sent more messages. She contacted every major power in the known galaxy. The answers were all the same. Some were polite. Some were cold. None of them offered help. The Veleth were going to die, and no one cared. Yuna did not sleep that night. She sat at her station and listened to the distress signal playing on repeat. The voice belonged to someone named Kirosa, an elder of the Veleth Collective. Her words were translated by the computer, but Yuna could hear the exhaustion in her tone. The fear, the fading hope. By morning, Yuna had made a decision. She copied the signal to a personal drive and took a shuttle to the orbital station above Earth. There, she requested an emergency meeting with the one person she believed might actually listen. Captain Park Taeho was not an important man by galactic standards. He commanded a medium-sized emergency response vessel called the Everlight. The ship was old but well-maintained. Its crew of 42 men and women had spent the last decade rescuing stranded miners, responding to colony disasters, and performing the kind of unglamorous work that never made the news. Taeho was 53 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples. His face carried the lines of someone who had seen too much suffering and chosen to keep fighting anyway. When Yuna played the Veleth distress signal for him, he listened without interrupting. When it finished, he was quiet for a long moment. How long do they have? He asked. Maybe 5 days, Yuna said. The Thoran fleet will reach them in 72 hours. Even if they survive the attack, their life support will fail within a week, and no one is going to help them. No, sir. I contacted everyone. They all refused. Tejo stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the blue curve of Earth filled the view. He had been born down there, in a small town near the southern coast of Korea. His grandmother had raised him after his parents died in a factory accident. She had survived a terrible war in her youth, and she had taught him one lesson above all others. When someone needs help, you help them. It does not matter who they are. It does not matter if it is hard. You help them because that is what good people do. The outer rim is 3 days away at maximum speed, Tejo said quietly. Sir, Command has already issued orders. They want us to stay in sector and continue normal operations. They said the Velas situation is not our concern. Tejo turned to face her. His expression was calm but firm. Lieutenant, I have spent my entire life following orders. I have done things I am not proud of because someone with more authority told me to. But I will not sit here and listen to people die while I do nothing. He walked to the communication panel and opened a channel to his crew. His voice was steady as he spoke. This is Captain Park. I know most of you are off duty right now, but I need everyone to listen. I have received a distress signal from an alien species called the Velith. They are refugees. Their ships are failing. A hostile fleet is hunting them down. The Galactic Council has refused to help. Every major power in the galaxy has turned their backs on these people. He paused, letting the words sink in. I am going to help them. I am taking the Everlight to the Outer Rim. This is not an authorized mission. Command has ordered us to stand down. Anyone who comes with me may face consequences when we return. I will not force anyone to join me. But I'm asking. The responses came quickly. First from Chief Engineer Oh Sim Min, who simply said, I am with you, Captain. Then from Dr. Beek Jisu, the ship's xenobiologist. Then from Sergeant Han Murray and her Marines. One by one, every member of the crew volunteered. Not a single person said no. Tejo felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride, gratitude, hope. He opened a final channel to Earth Command. His message was simple. This is Captain Park Tejo of the Everlight. We are departing for the Outer Rim to assist the Velith refugee fleet. We do not leave people to die. Not humans. Not anyone. Park out. He cut the transmission before they could respond. 12 minutes later, the Everlight launched into the darkness between stars. It was one ship against an empire. One crew against impossible odds. But sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, all it took was someone willing to answer the call. The Everlight dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the third day. What the crew saw through the viewports made them fall silent. The Velith fleet was dying. Ships floated in the void like broken toys. Some were dark and lifeless, their hulls torn open by weapons fire or mechanical failure. Bodies drifted between the vessels, frozen in the emptiness of space. The living ships were not much better. Their lights flickered weakly. Their engines sputtered and failed. The whole fleet looked like a graveyard waiting to happen. Captain Park Tejo stood on the bridge and counted the ships. The original distress signal had mentioned 200,000 refugees in nearly 200 vessels. Now he could see only 47 ships that still showed signs of life. 80,000 souls, maybe less, clinging to survival in rusting metal shells. Open a channel, Tejo ordered. Lieutenant Kim Yuna worked her console. Channel open, sir. Tejo spoke slowly and clearly. This is Captain Park Tejo of the human vessel Everlight. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. For a long moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, translated by the ship's computer. It was weak and tired, but it carried a note of disbelief. Human vessel. This is Elder Kirosa of the Velith Collective. Did you say you are here to help? Yes, Elder. We came as fast as we could. Another pause. When Kirosa spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion. We sent that signal to every species in the galaxy. No one answered. No one came. Why would humans travel so far for strangers? Tejo thought about his grandmother. He thought about the stories she had told him when he was young. Stories of war and suffering, but also stories of kindness from unexpected places. Because you needed help, he said simply. That is reason enough. The Everlight moved into position among the refugee ships. Dr. Beek Jisu prepared the medical bay for alien patients. She had studied Velith biology from old research files during the 3-day journey. But nothing could fully prepare her for treating a species she had never seen in person. Chief Engineer Oh Sung-min gathered his team and began assessing the damage to the nearest Velith vessel. The problems were worse than expected. Velith technology was based on organic compounds and biological systems. Human technology used metal and electronics. The two systems were never meant to work together. This is going to be impossible, one of the junior engineers muttered. Sung-dashman shook his head. Nothing is impossible. It is just difficult. Get to work. Captain Taiho took a shuttle to the Velith command ship to meet Elder Kirosa in person. Sergeant Han-mi accompanied him with a small security detail. Not because they expected trouble, but because the universe was dangerous and caution was wise. The inside of the Velith ship smelled strange, like wet earth and old flowers. The corridors were curved and organic, grown rather than built. Bioluminescent panels provided dim light. Everything felt alive, but barely. Elder Kirosa waited for them in what served as the bridge. She was old by Velith standards. Her carapace faded to a pale gray. She had 6 limbs, 4 for walking and 2 for delicate manipulation. Her eyes were large and dark, and they studied the humans with a mixture of wonder and exhaustion. Captain Park, she said through a translation device around her neck. I have lived for 120 cycles. In all that time, I have never seen anyone help the Velith without demanding something in return. What do you want from us? Tejo met her gaze. Nothing. That cannot be true. Everyone wants something. I want to get your people to safety. That is all. Kirosa was silent for a moment. Then she made a sound that the translator could not interpret. It might have been a laugh, or it might have been a sob. You are strange creatures, she said softly. Perhaps that is why you survived on your death world. Tejo did not understand the reference, but he did not ask for clarification. There were more important matters to discuss. Elder, my chief engineer is working to stabilize your ships. But we do not have much time. How long until the Thorin fleet arrives? Kirosa's posture changed. Fear rippled across her features. Our sensors are damaged, but our last estimate said 72 hours. That was 3 days ago. Yes, Tejo felt his stomach tighten. So they could be here at any moment. Yes, he activated his communicator. Sung-min, how fast can you get these ships moving? The engineer's voice came back, strained with effort. Captain, these engines are completely different from ours. I am learning as I go. I need at least 48 hours to make any of them space-worthy. You have 24. Maybe less. A long pause. Understood, sir. I will make it work. Back on the Everlight, the crew worked without rest. Engineers crawled through Velith ships, splicing human power cells into alien systems. Medical teams treated the wounded and sick, learning Velith physiology through trial and error. Pilots mapped escape routes through the asteroid fields that surrounded the fleet. Sergeant Han-mi did something different. She gathered the Velith who could still stand and began teaching them to fight. They were not soldiers. Most of them were farmers, artists, teachers, and caretakers. They had never held weapons in their lives. But Mireille had seen what happened to people who could not defend themselves, and she refused to let these refugees be helpless. You do not need to win, she told him through a translator. You just need to buy time. Time for the children to escape. Time for the old ones to reach safety. Can you do that? A young Velith named Tikami stepped forward. She was barely an adult by her species standards, with bright patterns on her carapace that indicated youth. I will try, she said. For my family. Myrain nodded and placed a simple weapon in her hands. That is all anyone can ask. As the hours passed, something remarkable happened. The Velith and humans began to work together not as strangers, but as partners. They shared meals. They learned each other's names. They told stories about their homes, their families, and their hopes for the future. Dr. Beek Jisu sat with a group of Velith children and showed them pictures of Earth. They were fascinated by the blue oceans and green forests. One child asked if humans really lived on a planet with such violent weather and dangerous animals. Jisu laughed and said yes, humans were very stubborn creatures who refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them. The child looked at her with wide eyes. You must be very brave. Or very foolish, Jisu replied with a smile. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference. On the bridge of the Everlight, Lieutenant Yuna monitored the long-range sensors. Her eyes were tired, but she refused to look away. Every minute that passed without a Thorn signature was a gift. Then, at hour 19, the gift ran out. Captain, she said, her voice tight with fear. I have contacts on the edge of sensor range. 30 ships. Thorin military signatures. Teho closed his eyes for just a moment. He thought about his crew. He thought about the Velith families huddled in their failing ships. He thought about his grandmother's words. Then he opened his eyes and gave his orders. All hands to battle stations. Signal the Velith fleet to prepare for emergency evacuation. And get Elder Kirosa on the line. Tell her the Thorin are here. The final countdown had begun. The Thorin warships emerged from faster-than-light travel like predators entering a hunting ground. They were sleek and black, built for speed and violence. Their hulls were covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. Even from a distance, they radiated menace. Commander Vex Taylor stood on the bridge of his flagship. The Crushing Fist. He was tall and powerful, with thick scales covering his body and rows of sharp teeth visible when he spoke. His species had conquered 12 star systems through brutality and fear. The Velith were supposed to be easy prey. He studied the sensor readings with irritation. The refugee fleet was still there, just as his scouts had reported. But something was wrong. There was an extra ship among the dying vessels. A ship that did not belong. Identify that vessel, he ordered. His tactical officer worked the controls. Commander, it appears to be a human ship. Emergency response class. Light armament. Minimal shields. Vex Taylor made a sound of contempt. Humans. The soft creatures from the Death World. What are they doing here? Unknown, Commander. Should we hail them? Yes. I want to hear what excuse they offer before we destroy them. On the bridge of the Everlight, Lieutenant Kim Yuna received the incoming transmission. Her hands trembled as she routed it to the main screen. Captain Park Tae-ho stood firm, his arms crossed, his expression calm. Commander Vex Taylor's face filled the display. His eyes were cold and cruel. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never lost a fight. Human vessel, you are in Thorin hunting territory. The Velith are our prey. They have been marked for extermination. Leave now, and we will allow you to live. Remain, and you will share their fate. Tae-ho did not flinch. Commander, I am Captain Park Tae-ho of the human vessel Everlight. These refugees are under our protection. We will not abandon them. Vex Taylor laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Protection? You have one ship. I have 30 warships armed with weapons that could crack your tiny vessel like an egg. What protection can you offer? The only kind that matters. We will stand between you and these people. If you want them, you will have to go through us. The Thoran commander leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You would die for insects? For creatures that are not even your own species? Tejo thought about all the Velith he had met over the past day. The children who played in the corridors despite their hunger. The engineers who worked alongside his crew without complaint. The elders who still had hope even after losing everything. Yes, he said simply. I would. Vextaler stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head in disbelief. Humans truly are the strangest species in the galaxy. Very well, Captain. You have chosen your death. I will make it quick out of respect for your foolish courage. The transmission ended. Chief Engineer Oh Sung-min's voice came through the internal com. Captain, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that I have managed to restore basic engine function to 31 Velith ships. They can make a short, faster-than-light jump to safety. And the bad news? The remaining 16 ships are too damaged. Their engines cannot be repaired in time. 8,000 Velith are on those vessels. Tejo closed his eyes. 8,000 lives that could not be saved through evacuation alone. 8,000 reasons to fight. How long do you need to transfer those survivors to the working ships? At least 2 hours, sir. Probably more. You have 90 minutes. Work faster. Throughout the refugee fleet, chaos erupted. Velith families rushed toward the ships that could still fly. Parents carried children. Young ones helped the elderly. The corridors were filled with desperate voices and scrambling limbs. Dr. Beek Jisu coordinated the medical evacuations. She tries patients with brutal efficiency, deciding who could be moved and who was too fragile to survive the transfer. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Sergeant Han Myre gathered her newly trained Velith volunteers. They were not ready for battle. They would never be ready. But they stood together anyway, weapons in their shaking hands, determined to protect their families. Young Takami approached the sergeant with a question in her large eyes. Sergeant Han, why are you doing this? Your ship cannot defeat the Thorn fleet. You will die here with us. Why stay? Myre knelt down to meet the young Velith at eye level. She had never been good with words. She was a soldier, trained to fight and follow orders. But something about this moment demanded honesty. A long time ago, she said slowly, humans had a terrible war. Millions of people died. Families were destroyed. Cities were burned. My great-grandmother lived through that war. She was just a child, alone and afraid. Takami listened without moving. One day, a stranger found her hiding in the ruins of her home. This stranger had nothing to gain from helping her. They were not family. They were not even from the same country. But the stranger gave her food, gave her shelter, and helped her survive. Myre paused, remembering the stories her family had passed down through generations. My great-grandmother asked the stranger why they helped her. Do you know what they said? Takami shook her head. They said, because when no one else would help you, someone should. That is what makes us human. The young Velith was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and touched Myre's hand with her own limb. It was a gesture of trust, of gratitude, of connection. I understand now, Takami said. You are not staying because you think you can win. You are staying because it is the right thing to do. Yes, Myre said. That is exactly why. On the bridge of the Everlight, Captain Tejo watched the Thorn fleet begin its approach. 30 warships against 1 emergency response vessel. The math was simple. The outcome was certain, but certainty had never stopped humans before. Lieutenant Yuna, open a channel to all Velith ships. Channel opened, sir. Tejo took a deep breath. People of the Velith Collective, this is Captain Park. The Thorn fleet is approaching. We have less than 2 hours before they reach weapons range. I need every ship that can fly to begin evacuation immediately. Do not wait. Do not look back. Get your people to safety. He paused, then continued. For those who cannot leave, we will protect you. The Everlight will position itself between the Thorn and the remaining refugees. We will buy as much time as we can. I cannot promise victory, but I can promise that you will not face this enemy alone. Across the fleet, Velith, who had never known kindness from other species, listened to the human captain's words. Some wept, some prayed. All of them felt something they had not felt in years. Hope. Elder Kirosa's voice came through the comm. Captain Park, I have lived long enough to see my world burn and my people scattered across the stars. I thought I had seen everything this universe had to offer, but I have never seen anything like your crew. Whatever happens today, the Velith will remember humanity forever. Tejo smiled sadly. Thank you, Elder. Now please, get your people to safety. We will hold the line. The Everlight moved into position. Its shields powered up. Its weapons armed. It was a small ship facing an armada of killers. A single flame against the darkness. And then the first Thorn missiles launched toward the fleet. Captain Park Tato floated in the darkness for 6 hours before they found him. His escape pod had been damaged in the explosion. Life support was failing. The cold was seeping through the hull. He drifted in and out of consciousness, dreaming of his grandmother's kitchen, of warm soup and soft words, of the home he thought he would never see again. Then light flooded through the viewport. A rescue shuttle had found him. When Tejo woke again, he was in a hospital bed on a human colony station. Medical machines beeped around him. His body ached from 100 small wounds. But he was alive. Elder Kirosa sat beside his bed. She had not moved in hours. When she saw his eyes open, she made a soft clicking sound that the translator rendered as relief. Her old limbs trembled as she leaned closer. Captain Park, she whispered. You survived. Tejo tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Kirosa helped him drink water from a small cup. He swallowed painfully and tried again. The Velith. Are they safe? Yes. 72,000 of my people reached safety because of you. Because of your crew. Because of the humans who came to help. Tejo closed his eyes. 72,000. It was not everyone. They lost people in the battle. Ships destroyed. Families torn apart. But 72,000 lives had been saved. That was something. That was everything. Sun-Min, he said quietly. Did he make it? Kirosa's expression shifted. The translator struggled to convey the emotion. Your engineer was found in the wreckage. He was badly injured. The doctors say he will live, but he will need time to heal. Relief washed through Tejo like a warm wave. His old friend was alive. They would have many conversations ahead, many repairs to make, many stories to share. What about the others? My crew? Most survived. The escape pods functioned well. Sergeant Han Murray has been organizing search and rescue operations. Lieutenant Kim Yuna has been working with our communications officers to coordinate the evacuation. Dr. Beek, Jisoo has barely slept. She refuses to rest until every patient is stable. Tejo smiled despite the pain. His crew, his family, they were all still fighting, still helping, still doing what needed to be done. And Pilot Choinari? Kirosa made a sound that might have been laughter. She led the Thorn fighters on a chase through 3 asteroid fields. When her shuttle ran out of fuel, she crashed into a mining platform and demanded they lend her another ship. She is quite remarkable. That sounds like Nari. The elder was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been waiting on her lips since the battle ended. "Why, Captain? I have asked you before, but I still do not understand. Why did you come? Why did your people sacrifice so much for strangers?" Tejo thought about the question. He thought about his grandmother, about the lessons she had taught him, about the stories that had shaped his entire life. "When I was young," he said slowly, "my grandmother told me about a war that nearly destroyed her country. She was just a child when it happened. Her parents were killed. Her home was burned. She had nothing and no one." Kirosa listened without moving. One day, she was hiding in the ruins of a village when a group of strangers found her. They were soldiers from another country, people who spoke a different language and had no connection to her at all. They could have ignored her. They could have walked away, but they did not. He paused, remembering his grandmother's voice as she told this story, the way her eyes had grown distant and soft. They fed her. They protected her. They carried her on their backs for 3 days until they reached safety. When she asked them why they helped her, one of the soldiers said something she never forgot. Tejo looked at Elder Kirosa. He said, "Because the universe is cold, but we do not have to be." The elder was silent for a long time. Then she reached out and placed her forelimb gently on Tejo's hand. In Velith culture, this was the deepest gesture of family. It meant that they were bonded now, not by blood, but by something stronger. "Your grandmother's soldier was wise," Kirosa said. "And so are you." 3 months later, the Velith collective officially settled on a terraformed moon in the outer colonies of human space. Earth's government had initially resisted, embarrassed by the unauthorized rescue mission and worried about political consequences. But the public outcry had been overwhelming. Millions of humans had demanded that the refugees be welcomed. In the end, the politicians had no choice but to agree. The moon was called New Haven. It was a small world, with green forests and clean rivers and skies that reminded the Velith of the home they had lost. Human engineers helped them build settlements. Human doctors helped them recover from their injuries. Human teachers helped the children learn new languages and new ways of thinking. Captain Park Tejo attended the dedication ceremony. He stood with his crew Sung Min, now walking with the help of a cane. Yuna, with a small scar on her forehead that she refused to remove. Jisoo and Myray and Nari and all the others who had survived. They watched as Elder Kirosa unveiled a memorial wall in the center of the new colony. The wall was made of polished stone imported from Earth. On it, names were carved in both human script and Velith glyphs. The names of those who had died in the rescue. The names of the brave and the kind and the foolish and the wonderful. Above the names, a phrase was carved in a dozen languages. Human languages and Velith languages and languages from species across the galaxy, who had heard the story and been moved by it. The phrase was simple. When no one else would answer, humanity came. Tejo read the words and felt something warm in his chest. Pride, yes, but also something deeper. A sense that what they had done mattered. That kindness, even in a cold universe, could make a difference. After the ceremony, young Takami found him. She had grown in the past 3 months, her carapace now showing the first signs of adult coloring. She stood before the captain with her head held high. "Captain Park," she said, "I wanted to thank you for everything." Tejo smiled. "You already thanked me, Takami. Many times." "I know, but I also wanted to tell you something." She hesitated, then continued. "When I am old enough, I want to join a ship like yours. I want to help people the way you helped us." Tejo looked at this young alien who had lost her world, lost her family, lost everything except hope. And he saw the future. "Then I will be honored to serve with you someday," he said. Takami made a sound of happiness and ran off to rejoin her friends. Sergeant Han Mirai walked up beside Tejo. She watched the Velith children playing among the human visitors, laughing and chasing each other through the gardens of New Haven. "Do you think the Thorin will come back?" she asked. Taiho considered the question. "Probably, someday, but not today. And when they do?" He looked at the memorial wall, at the names of the fallen, at the words carved in stone. "When they do," he said, "we will answer again." The sun set over New Haven, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Velith and humans stood together, watching the light fade. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species heard the story of what had happened in the Outer Rim. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Some ignored it entirely, but some listened. Some remembered. And some began to think that maybe, just maybe, the universe was not as cold as they had believed, because one ship had answered a cry for help, and that had changed everything.